Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Test, test. Test.
Swear them in already. This budget hearing conducted by the Committee on Appropriations and Adjudication now reconvenes discussion of the fiscal year 2018 executive budget this afternoon. We are meeting with the Guam Fire Department to discuss their budget proposal. I want to preface this hearing with the uncertainty the government of Guam faces with regards to potential negative impacts to general fund revenues, collections, and economic activity as a result of the numerous factors such as the H-2B visa denials, potential federal tax reform, and cuts that may erode Guam's revenue base, caps on Section 30 revenues to be collected, etc. With all these issues at the top of our mind, the Guam Legislature has a daunting task of ensuring that we provide funding for the public services the people of Guam want and need. As a brief overview, the Governor's FY 2018 executive budget request for the Guam Fire Department is $38.2 million, which is a $212,000 increase over the FY 17 expenditure of $38. I want to thank the officials from GFD for being here today, and as much as you've already been sworn in, let's just begin with your presentation, Chief.
Thank you, Speaker Cruz, honorable members of the 34th Legislature. Thank you for being here to listen to our proposal for fiscal year 2018 budget. I'm joined at the table with members of my staff. To my far left is my Administrative Services Officer, Dan Hattick. My immediate left is Assistant Fire Chief Michael Nkanko, and to my right is Assistant Fire Chief Darren Burr, all here to participate in this hearing as needed. Thank you again for this opportunity to be here today for the fiscal year 2018 Guam Fire Department proposed budget review process. This legislature's continuous support of the Guam Fire Department over the past years and during my time as your fire chief has been recognized and appreciated. Along with the administration, we must continue to foster and increase our collaboration to ensure that the fire service of Guam remains the benchmark of the South Pacific, comparable to the best fire departments stateside. Just as in years past, I have worked closely with BBMR and DOA to ensure that we have a realistic budget that meets our mission mandates, increases efficiencies, while also sustaining or increasing our capabilities. I am committed to seeking ways to decrease expenditures while also seeking revenue enhancement, or at the very least, recoup the cost to provide services. These efforts will ensure that our personnel consisting of firefighters, E911 emergency medical dispatchers, administrative non-uniform employees, and mechanics are led, paid, trained, and equipped to perform their duties, resulting in lives saved and property protected. Continually, we are challenged with an increased attrition rate over the past 6 years through retirement and other means, resulting in a net force reduction of 54 positions since the last recruitment of 30 in 2013. In total, we have remaining 249 firefighters, EMDs, and non-uniform staff with 126 vacancies. Retirement in particular has produced many vacancies in senior ranking positions, requiring personnel to assume duties well above their pay grade. This is necessary to maintain minimum staffing requirements as guided by National Fire Protection Association and OSHA Occupational Safety and Health Administration standards. Including other leave and military deployments, the staffing challenge has also resulted in increase in irregular overtime expenditures up to $165,000 a pay period. We continue to adjust for shortages by transfer of personnel to rebalance rank, experience, firefighters with advanced skills, and military reservists so that we can absorb these challenges with the resources available. Along with promotions, recruitment is authorized in FY17 but projected by August of this year. However, we will not see relief for another 8 months. Highlights for this FY17 include progress in the replacement of the 911 system with the assistance of the Attorney General's Office, GFD should be ready to receive proposals within June, a major step towards the final procurement of this much-needed system. The Guam Fire Department has just been awarded grant funds for the purchase of hazmat team equipment that will allow for confined space rescues and biological warfare agent identification. Also, rescue units will be receiving new hydraulic extrication tools and parts, allowing us to upgrade the ones currently in service and providing for a quicker, more efficient response to trapped victims involved in vehicle crashes and industrial accidents. New self-contained breathing apparatus is currently on order and will replace outdated units. This purchase will also bring the department into compliance with the latest NFPA standards for respiratory protection. Pro Board training and National Registry for EMTs, CUs continues to be offered to fire department personnel, which will allow our members to keep their EMT certifications valid and also prepare personnel for future promotions. Community partnerships make up some of our most noteworthy accomplishments. Every firehouse has voluntarily committed to at least one community-based project as a way to bring positive image to the fire service while building esprit de corps and morale. Projects include the painting of bus stops, the Estumbo Community Center, and maintenance of baseball fields and DOE school grounds. GFD also participates in awareness and fundraising efforts for autism, Red Cross, and cancer organizations. In response, businesses within the community have reached out to the department because of our involvement throughout the island. Some examples are the paving of the apparatus driveway at the Estumbo Fire Station and the repairs and upkeep of several fire stations at no cost to the government. In FY18, we look forward to the long-awaited installment of the next-gen E911 system. We are working with GURA to relocate and build a new Sinahanya Fire Station and training ground. I continue to take advantage of federal programs to procure fire trucks, tankers, and a high-rise apparatus. We are also going through the process of creating and establishing an emergency medical technician position with the intent to recruit initially with limited-term employees to ascertain the advantages of staffing ambulances with non-firefighters as a cost-saving measure. To demonstrate our efforts towards revenue enhancement, we have conducted analysis on the appropriate fees and fines updates needed to recover the cost of providing services and lessen our dependence on the general fund. In fire prevention, our fees and fines are antiquated and far below the industry standard for communities and economies of our scale. For example, it costs $35 to conduct an inspection for a small storefront, while it costs the same amount to inspect any one of our two-month hotels. In emergency medical services, we charge less than the 25% of the allowable reimbursable costs of Medicare, Medicaid. And finally, for our fire suppression responses, we are nowhere near the industry standard. To this end, I have recommended fees and fine schedules update, and I'm ready to present to this body to create legislation and implement as soon as possible. Significant to the FY 2017, we are projecting a lapse of $760,511 from the vacancy pool cost account due to not filling vacancies in the first and second quarters. As per Department of Administration, we expect to hire by August 45 fire recruits. We project that $272,776 will be used for salary and benefits, leaving $760,511 in the vacancy pool cost account. I am requesting authorization to carry over these lapses to allow for additional recruitment in FY 2018. Moving forward to our FY 18 budget submission, the general fund portion shows an overall increase of $22,243 or 0.06% from FY 2017 and accounts for true personnel costs to include overtime projections, the recruitment of 45 additional firefighters, 44 promotions of uniformed personnel in this fiscal year 2017, and 8 promotions and 5 new vacant non-uniform positions for fiscal year 2018. Two significant decreases are a decrease in overtime appropriations of $1,230,698 or a negative 22.83% due to recruitment of the 45 recruits, and a decrease of $306,071 or negative 49% in operations due to funding requests reflected in special funds. However, there is an increase of $32,700 or 8.02% in utilities for water sewer charges. You will see increases in both of our special funds. The Fire, Life, and Medical Emergencies or FLAME Fund calls for an overall increase of $635,465 or 60% from FY 2017 in anticipation of the successful passing of GFD's fees and fines schedule proposal. This amount is reflected in the $690,465 or 142.30% increase in operations to cover costs normally funded by the general fund to procure essential firefighting, medical, and rescue equipment. There is a decrease of $55,000 or negative 0.57% in capital outlay for emergency vehicles based on intended purchases. The E911 Special Fund increase was adjusted to allow for the addition of an administrative assistant position at $91,056 in salary and benefits authorized in FY 2017. However, it still includes the estimated $300,000 plus a year lease and maintenance of a new 911 system, replacing our current system or phase one of our long-term goal of E911. This is reflected in the object class change from capital outlay for 50 to contractual to 30 to supplement the cost of the lease program. There is also a decrease of $3,065 or negative 0.64% in operations and $33,000 or 100% in capital outlay, which is moved to the contractual category. In all, the Guam Fire Department is requesting $38,243,478 for the fiscal year 2018 and the carryover of the vacancy pool cost account. This is a $212,699 or 1% increase from our current FY17 budget. We are confident that this will sustain our current progress and level of public service. The Guam Fire Department is committed to meet our island's expectations to provide the best service we can, and I am personally committed to work with each one of you to ensure the needs of our island are addressed with the realm of the fire service and public safety. For your review, attached pages in the back are the specific variances, plus and minus, of our three different funding sources that I just explained so that you can see it in detail as far as the explanations. Thank you again for allowing me this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions and recommendations.
Thank you very much, Chief, for that very thorough presentation. Your appropriation level for this last year, I thought, was $36 million, or you're saying 38. How much in cash did you guys receive from the Department of Administration this last fiscal year? Of the $38 million, how much of that did you receive in actual cash?
I don't have an actual cash amount answer for you, but I do know that all allotments that were needed to date have been released to us. We do have a reserve that's held of $1.2 million, which we fully expect to be released to us before the end of this FY.
You're going to get the 1.2 release this fiscal year for last fiscal year?
No, for FY17.
Oh, all right. Then for 16, how much of the 16 funds, how much of the 38 did you receive, actual receive in cash?
If you give me a minute, Senator, and I'll research it for you. $35,412,648.
In actual cash. That's not the release from BBMR, but this is actual cash.
It's actual expenditures and encumbrances, yes.
In your budget request, you're asking for or even in your presentation, you make mention of 126 vacancies. Are those vacancies funded or unfunded?
Not all 126 are funded. At this point, only 45 fire recruits are funded into the FY 2018 budget, along with the promotions, 44 promotions that we are anticipating to occur this fiscal year, which will carry into FY 2018.
That was budgeted.
Correct.
Okay,
And also requested for in this year, this proposal.
because you're asking for 5.2 for 16 fire chiefs, is that, and 45 firefighters, 18 special services, and 5 battalion chiefs.
Yes, those are all approved. GG1s are down at DOA and to be filled this fiscal year, FY17.
Are you hiring new people, or is that,
So promotions are primarily from within. So, their budget will, their salary will follow them with the additional, I believe it's 2 steps up, one step to the right increment that they get for promotion. And this is all calculated within the vacancy pool cost account that was given to us for FY17.
and you want that to carry over?
Yes, sir. So to be more detailed with it, because we didn't fill the position in the first and second quarters, there will be that lapse. But since our 45 fire recruits are accounted for in the next fiscal year to include the promotions, it is my hope that, and I believe I explained in my testimony, that we can carry over so I can recruit an additional cycle or additional set of fire recruits of at least 30. With that 700,000 that might be carried over.
You received 35, you're asking for 700 to be carried forward, right?
Whatever is the remaining in the vacancy pool cost account. And I wouldn't deny if you were to add more.
I'm still trying to figure out how, with a flat budget request, all of these are still possible. Where's all that money coming from for all of these additional positions?
Yeah, so as I stated, our attrition rate is through the roof. We're averaging about 15 retirees a year for the past 5 years. We're like a net 54 minus from our last recruitment cycle of 30. So basically what's happened is these are retirees at the 30 to 35 year mark whose salary base can cover probably 2 or 3 other new firefighters or fire recruits. And so that's what we've been doing, is taking from their retirement date the lapse funding that would have been used for them and using that to apply it to these other shortfalls, which is really the increase in overtime due to those retirements and vacancies.
Which brings
And
me,
authorized in our budget, yes.
which brings me to my overtime question. This morning I commended Chief Cruz for only asking for $1 million in overtime. If my reading of your budget is correct, you're requesting $4.2 million in overtime and an additional $5.6 million for special pay, including night differential.
Right here. Yes, so
Almost $10 million in overtime night differential. I mean, why that huge discrepancy?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question exactly. Can you answer it or
Well,
ask it one more time?
This morning, Chief Cruz only asked for $1 million in overtime.
Okay.
And even if I criticized him about or had questions about the way that it was being allocated towards executive, at least it's gone down from the $2 million that we've had to deal with in the past. But I'm looking at yours and trying to figure out an overtime request for $4.2 million and the $5.6 million for special pay.
Right, so the special pay is for the night differential, incentive pays for EMS, which we also have a proposal to reduce, talking about flat rate incentive pays for these advanced skilled firefighters and services that we provide. The overtime is a reflection of our staffing shortages. We are admittedly spending a lot on overtime due to critical staffing shortages, vices shutting down services or shutting down, God forbid, a fire station. So yes, this overtime is a lot, and but we've done everything possible to this point to curtail it or reduce it.
What was the delay in filling the vacancies with the new recruits? I mean, we gave that $6 million.
Correct, and
45
that's a question I'll
5
defer
years ago.
to DOA. The Guam Fire Department has done everything within its authority to effectuate this promotion and recruitment, and so we, just like the rest of the agencies, we wait on Department Administration's recruitment branch, and so in that sense, I would defer that question to them and request that somehow resources be given to them to allow them to give us what we need.
I mean, if they processed it expeditiously, it would seem there would be a $4.2 million savings in overtime, or at least the overtime that you're attributing to your shortages.
Yes, there will be a reduction in
4.2
overtime, correct.
That 4.2, if properly managed, could handle whatever increases she wants and a couple of other places.
I agree.
I'll probably get killed for this next question. But in 2012, the governor submitted a piece of legislation to the legislature as governor and asked that it be introduced at the Committee on Rules. I believe it was Bill 511. And in it, he tried to address the recommendations of the OPA about all this specialty pay and 120 hours for Sun 6 and all these others. Inasmuch as that was his proposal in 2012 when he first came in to office, has there been much discussion or preparation on from Adelup to at least get that part of the bill addressed?
Sure.
I mean,
Mr.
it was a
Speaker.
huge encompassing bill, and there were various parts of it that were unacceptable to various members of the legislature. But inasmuch as he was willing to address an OPA concern, has there been any movement on our part to address that so that...
Absolutely. So in 2012, I did submit a proposal for a 3-platoon system that would work towards that end of reducing overtime. The issue that we have with the fire service that is common across the nation is we seem to always want to compare the fire service to the police service or to the administrative worker. The bottom line is we are guided by a standard which is OSHA and NFPA compliant. It's NFPA 1710, which requires, and this is the most as basic as I can make it, a 2-in, 2-out rule. Well, bottom line is we need 4 firefighters on a fire truck to provide fire service, as opposed to our brother police officers. All you need is 1 officer on the street with a weapon and a badge, and you have law enforcement. To that end, while it looks from the salary point of view, the counters would think that, oh, it's easy to find some savings. But when you look at the overall mission of the Guam Fire Department, the vast mission sets that we have, from fire and emergency response, emergency medical services, hazardous material response, confined space rescue, ocean and land search and rescue, all these different aspects to what we do require personnel and a lot of expensive equipment and a lot of training and investment in our personnel. So the fire service has come to this point where they found that this 24-hour schedule is a schedule that works specifically for fire service. So much so that the Fair Labor Standards Act has created an entire exemption, the 7K exemption, for firefighters, which in itself should tell you that it is, the fire service needs to be looked at in an isolated view to understand why we are compensated as such. So the bottom line is we need 4 firefighters to be on duty at any given time on a fire truck. You know, the ambulance needs 2, our rescue units need 4, so on and so forth with those units, and they got 24 hours to cover. If you were to compare that to the police service, you're asking to hire 12 firefighters to cover one 24-hour period, as opposed to the police service, all you need is 3 to cover a 24-hour period for that particular beat that they might have. So the 24-hour schedule is something that's been tried and true over years, not just on Guam. It's not an only on Guam thing. It's across the nation, across the world, really. Our neighbors up in Anderson and down at Navy Federal run a 144-hour schedule. That's 24 hours more than we do, just to staff their units. So the 24-hour firefighter schedule is a cost-saving measure. As a matter of fact, that is the first introduction to this whole, when you do the research, they'll start with the 24-hour schedule as a cost-saving measure, as it is. But the 3-platoon system that I did submit a white paper for to the legislature at the time, at 2012, does, from the outside point of view, you see the reduction in overtime. But what you don't see, or what is realized, is that in order to go to a 3-platoon system, you need to hire an entire shift. And right now, to meet our minimum standards, it requires about 140 to 150 firefighters just to cover one shift. So that means you would need to hire another 150 plus promotions at about 80 promotions altogether for that 150. And when you start crunching the numbers, you'll find that the 2-platoon system on a 24-hour schedule with the 120 hour as stated by law in subsection 6219, the firefighter compensation is the best cost-saving measure for the fire service. And I've sat down with the public auditor many times in my tenure as a fire chief, and she's reluctantly decided not to approach the subject anymore.
Well, I mean, I understand that, but then the governor took the baton and introduced it to us. And so I'm wondering, since 2012, has there been any movement on his part or your part to try to address that in the bill?
So
or
as you recall, I became the fire chief in September of 2011. And October, it's been a while. And so just as I explained to you, I explained to our administration at the time, but I did commit to doing the research and trying to meet his intent and find a way, which is how we came up with the 3-platoon system. But where it looks like on paper that there might be some savings to meet the intent, when you actually crunch the numbers, the savings are not there.
In your budget, your EMS rescue operations is about $10 million. Your fire suppression bureau is $22 million. What does fire suppression do? I mean, what are
Okay, so we have 12 fire trucks. Each fire truck requires 4 personnel, 4 staff. In reality, today, we're really only able to staff it with 3 firefighters. That's how critical we are. And so we've adjusted our response posture, how we do things, just to meet that requirement of the staffing. And then the ambulance service only consists of 7 ambulances that have only 2 people on it on any given day, as well as my 2 ALS advanced life support units that only have 2 on any given day, and then our rescue units as well. So there's just more firefighters on the fire trucks, and that's why you see the difference.
Your administrative and support services, what exactly does that entail?
Basically, right here, the 3 of us to the left, plus my admin staff behind me, which comes out to about 10 non-uniform employees, which includes my mechanics as well. So it's a very small administrative service bureau relative to any other Guam agency of this size.
Who's the one that goes out and does all of, you make mention of doing the inspections at a small storefront
Yes.
and at a big hotel?
So I do have...
Who goes out and does those
I have 12
inspections?
12 firefighters that are assigned to my Fire Prevention Code Enforcement Bureau, led by Assistant Fire Chief Joey Manabusan, who's not here today. And they basically do all the code enforcement.
And they're under suppression?
And it's incorporated, yes, and under suppression.
Within suppression.
Yes.
And do those 12 get work to 24-hour?
When yes, they're working 24 hours, and they only get compensated for what they work.
Are they doing inspections at hotels and storefronts at 2 o'clock in the morning, at 4
Actually,
o'clock?
they do. They do. We are, the fire code does not rest. We do surprise inspections in establishments that are running at that time of the night, and we all know they exist. Even something as simple as Linda's, they might make a stop in. But one thing to note is that these are also firefighters who also respond to incidents, especially in this current state of our department. We're so short-staffed that whenever I can get people to respond, they will respond from whatever unit they're at.
How specialized is the training for these individuals that are going out doing the inspections?
We do have a pro board certification for fire inspector all the way up to fire inspector 4. So it is intensive. The fire code is a very thick manual. We're here on Guam, we're using an international fire code, and it's very cumbersome, very complicated, and every establishment has a different aspect to that code, or it's applied depending. So while there might be over 20,000 business licenses that exist as per rev and tax, over 20,000, I only have 12 inspectors to get to these establishments, which requires annual inspections. And so if I was able to do my fees and fines presentation for you, I kind of go more in detail on what it all entails. But we've established a self-inspection program to help capture those that we cannot reach on an annual basis. At this point, with my 12 inspectors, we only average about 4,000 projects a year, or 4,000 inspections, business, new and renewed licenses. And I can do so much more if I can get this proposed fee schedule implemented, which will result in enhanced revenue.
Can those inspections be done by a non-uniformed personnel?
Yes, we can. And we can train specifically fire inspectors. We would have to establish a position for inspectors, similar to a building inspector. So yes, we can hire code officials.
And what would the difference in pay be? I mean, the 12 people that you have in this division already. You have a battalion chief, right?
There'll still be a need for a fire marshal because a fire marshal is the authority of the fire code. So the fire marshal, absent a fire chief, the fire chief is normally a fire marshal, but when he's able to designate somebody specifically smart in the fire code and code enforcement, then it's advantageous to assign a fire marshal.
What would the difference in pay be between that kind of an inspector in having one of you uniform people who are needed in the ambulances and on the fire trucks?
I don't have a specific answer, but I will tell you that the starting pay of a firefighter is somewhere around $11 for a firefighter one, who we could train and put there. But a code inspector, I assume, would be above a minimum wage, obviously, probably around the $15 mark an hour, which is still more expensive than putting firefighter. And you add in the years increments, paid by the hour, I mean, it's pretty much the same. The difference is that you're going to have to pay this inspector overtime after 80 hours on the 81st hour, as opposed to a firefighter, you only pay him overtime after 106.
But the total that you guys are getting, at least in my review, I've been trying to convince my staff to sign up for the next cadre because the salaries that you guys are getting.
Yeah. Senator, these are salaries based on hours worked. We work it.
No,
the guys are out there.
I understand that, and I'm just trying to figure out whether or not, rather than 12 uniformed individuals, if 2 uniformed individuals are overseeing a group of 10 non-uniformed individuals, or even to address, I know the complaint of, I get calls all the time about the fact that it's taking 2 weeks to get an appointment to have a fire person, or 3 weeks to get a fire person to come over.
Yeah.
If we could train more people non-uniformed and not with the same kind of training that you guys have, wouldn't that be less expensive and be able to move these things faster so that I don't get the calls about having to wait a
Absolutely,
week or a month?
Senator, Speaker. Of course, if you throw more resources towards me, I can definitely find the efficiencies. I mean, we've done it with 911. We went from having firefighters staffing the 911 system to now fully civilian. But at that time, to man the 911 center 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we only had about 10 firefighters assigned to dispatch. And that was in the early 90s, mid-90s. Now we currently have 26 EMDs, emergency medical dispatchers, who get overtime right after 80 hours. So, yes, you're going to save money on individual firefighters, but you're still going to pay money because you have to hire more, pay more in benefits, and deal with more personnel issues. So,
No, I realize that, but I'm just saying
it's really
the amount that you used to pay for those 9 individuals or 10 individual firefighters at E911, when compared to the amount that's being paid for these 26, even if you take into account the 20-year difference, would there be a savings in that if we could get non-uniform people as opposed to uniform? I mean, because with all of the training that you guys have to do, and the additional pay that you get because you're all EMT certified, or you're this certified, or you're that certified, and this certified, if we could keep all of you in uniform in the ambulances and in the fire trucks, and find non-uniform people to do some of these inspections. Couldn't we serve two purposes? One, make sure that we're not short in a fire truck, and two, that we can move these inspections a little faster in the community.
I agree. That is definitely one way to get it done. I think in the end, the cost is going to be the same. You might be taking advantage of one end, but also having a disadvantage on the other. But I'm willing to do the research and look into the position development. Just right here, looking at what Chief Berger has brought up, it costs average inspectors about $57,000 in salary. You add benefits, that comes out to about $90,000, which is really kind of the average for firefighters. So we get more out of a uniformed firefighter doing inspections because they're not only doing inspections, they're responding, arson investigation, public education, reviewing plans. Those are basically the four missions of the Fire Prevention Bureau. So I understand what you're saying, Mr. Speaker, and I'll look into it. Just so you know, that's exactly what we're trying to do with the EMS, Emergency Medical Services, in creating the Emergency Medical Technician position, which is by FLSA an 80-hour position. So we can pull those 2 firefighters off of the ambulance and just pick up 6 EMTs to run that ambulance for a 24-hour period.
But I thought it was absolutely imperative to have those firefighters on the ambulances.
Well,
You mean we can get lower paid individuals, not lower paid, but less expensive personnel to handle the ambulances?
Yes, which is why I've been trying to establish the EMT position. So at this point, they have to do a salary study, from what I understand, at Department of Administration to set the compensation level for this position, and then I can fill it with, at first in the beginning, probably come back in front of you to ask for funding if need, but fill it with limited term employees to see if it really works.
Okay, I'll let some of the others ask some questions for right now. I may come back with some additional ones. I'll start with my vice chair, and
Thank you very
then
much.
your oversight chair, and then the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a couple of quick questions, Chief. Thank you for your testimony this afternoon. Looking at the offset, because I noticed that you highlighted the proposed fees that you're going to present to this legislative body. What is your additional revenue that you anticipate to generate as a result of those fees?
So I actually do have the presentation here, and it's actually queued up if you had the time and want to see the presentation. But just on conservative estimates on what our fees and fines, if implemented immediately, could bring in, based on our collection rate of 60% with our ambulance billing, we could potentially bring in almost $9 million in revenue. Now, I presented this to BBMR as well as to ADALUP, to administration, and being conservative, they only put in the $600,000, just to be really conservative and see whether this actually passes before they want to give us the full appropriation or the full request, or allow us to put in a full request, which is, par for the course, considering how we did it with our ambulance billing. We were given a projected potential revenue at a conservative projection, and then when we saw the realized revenue come in, then we were able to request for a higher appropriation based on fees collected.
Have you proceeded, Mr. Speaker, if I may, have you proceeded through the administrative adjudication process?
So, yes, the administrative adjudication process does allow us to increase our fees and fines to that aspect. But in doing our research, we're talking probably over 1,000 different fees and fines that are not covered in our enabling laws for fees and fines. And so it almost seemed like we needed to do two things. One, the administrative adjudication process for our existing fees and fines, and then legislation to implement the new ones that we want to put in. So it's my hope that we can just put this all together into legislation and kind of fix and tweak the current law as it is.
Well, one of the reasons why I asked, first and foremost, is making sure that the public understands exactly what those additional fees will be that are going to be newly established, and then the
Yes.
adjustment of the fees. And the budget that you're requesting, there's heavy reliance in terms of offsetting special funds to take care of operational requirements versus the general fund. So I think it's commendable, but to anticipate that already the fees that are being proposed are automatically going to be adopted, that's where my concern comes in. Because let's say, for example, the legislature considers the fees, but phases it in. Then the chairman of appropriations, the speaker, now would have to find the additional resources to be able to offset the revenues that you really need
Yes.
in terms of operating your department. So that's where the concern comes in terms of the timelines and how quickly you're going to present it to the oversight chair and how quickly she's going to be able to move forward with it so that it can be addressed as part of your revenue operational requirements in the next fiscal year. So that's one of the issues that certainly I hope that you can fast track that and see if it can be factored in. Otherwise, the chairman is going to have to certainly try to find other resources. The other aspect in your overall presentation, I know you highlighted that in 2013 you recruited 30 additional firefighters. Since 2011, and you mentioned 6 years, you've lost 54 uniformed firefighters.
80. Through attrition, we've lost 80, and the net is 54.
Oh, the net.
Yes.
So you've lost 80 firefighters. Your last time you recruited was 2013. The legislature authorized the executive branch 3-4 years ago through the vacancy pool fund to be able to go out and recruit. And then now you're looking at August to be able to recruit the additional 45.
Yes.
And have you received the direct concurrence of BBMR?
Yes.
Approval of BBMR,
Yes.
BBMR to be able to proceed with the 45?
Yes. So as I stated earlier, all the GG1s are signed. They went through the right route. They're sitting at DOA, which initiates the process of recruitment. At this point, we are just waiting for the certified list to come our way so that we can select. To their defense, DOA's defense, there was over 1,100 applicants for initially what was 30 positions. But we were allowed to recruit an additional 15 to make it 45. And it is cumbersome, or it's a very difficult task for DOA with their limited resources, from what I understand, to sift through this 1,100 applicants and give us a certified list.
Okay, you also, on another item, you mentioned about the community partnership, and Chief, as an individual who had, I guess, visibly seen the partnership over at Stumbo Fire Station, I think it's very commendable that the department continues to reach out to our community partners and
Absolutely.
acquire those additional support. Mr. Speaker, I think we saw anywhere from 4 or 5 different businesses contributed, inclusive of the Deputy Mayor's office,
Yes.
contribute to the refurbishment and the, I guess, the cleanup of the Stumbo Fire Station. If you recall, there was a public concern that it was rat infested, and the chief was able to acquire support from the private sector and not necessarily use general fund or public funds for that. So that's extremely commendable. Now, looking at Chief, I know that you occasionally are given, I guess, the opportunity to be able to allow personnel to deploy. Have you used the mechanism in law to be able to try to backfill those positions until you're deployed soldiers or airmen?
You mean to bring on limited term appointments while they're deployed? Like I said, firefighting is a very vast technical service or career field. At this point, it'd be hard-pressed to find qualified individuals unless they transferred in from off-island who are firefighter qualified right off the street.
Well, the allowance by law is to allow for retirees.
Oh, the retirees. So with retirees, we did attempt and we did do a call out, and it started out with the volunteers coming in and coming out to Station 10. It was something that we attempted. However, it just didn't seem feasible. You know, when these guys, like I said, the fire department and the fire service, they talk about career employees, firefighters, who are at the end of their career, want to retire because, you know, this is a very physical job. And so these guys, unless they're in spectacular shape, don't want to do this job anymore at that age or at their current state of health. So it is very hard to find anybody to bring in to backfill. And so while if they come knocking on my door, I'll accept them. But I would rather focus all my energy in recruiting young blood into the fire service because that's where it's truly needed.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Half a day, Fire Chief. How are you
Half a day.
today?
Good.
Thank you for the rest of your staff for coming here today. I want to commend the work that you have been doing, especially the excellent job you did at the Harmon Industrial Park. I believe we had an information hearing that you weren't able to attend because you were on military orders perhaps, or some reason or the other. But I wanted to inquire, has that matter been resolved?
Which matter exactly?
The promotions, there was a concern that some of the firefighters had that they were not given ample time or proper administrative action was done to inform them of the requirements for their job promotions.
The matter has been resolved to the satisfaction of management and Department of Administration. Now, whether the employee agrees to the matter of how it was resolved, I can't answer that. But
So you don't know if it's been resolved within your agency yet?
Oh no, we've resolved it to
Okay.
every aspect that we can, and
Okay.
what we've done, inclusive, is put on more classes to allow these individuals to basically
Oh, very good.
get the training.
And
So
this is
we're
also,
currently
this is also before, so you're giving them additional classes, and then on top of that, did you halt the promotion process?
Oh
Or
no, the application period happened last year. So
Right.
if, like I stated in my budget request, we are asking for more promotions in 2018.
Okay, so you're still moving forward?
Yes. So
Okay.
you know, my hope is that we open up the application period again for those future promotions, and then these guys can compete.
I see. Okay. I just wanted to talk a little bit about your overtime. Out of your staffing pattern, and just bear with me because it's going to be a little bit, maybe not so technical, but it's going to be a little bit difficult for me to come out and say this, but out of your staffing pattern, how many personnel do you have on call that does not reside at the firehouse, that does not reside on any of the fire establishments, but are at home and are paid to be on call?
Nobody is really.
Like a 24-hour
Yeah,
on
nobody is paid to be on call.
Okay.
I make it very clear that I will not compensate any firefighter unless they actually work the hour. Now, there are some who are on flexible schedules. For example, my, firefighter 2, Kevin Riley, who is a firefighter first and foremost. He just recently pulled a shift at the Chico Fire Station. But he's also my public information officer. He's also my federal programs specialist and grant writer.
So you're telling me that maybe you, perhaps as a fire chief, you don't get paid around the clock for the hours that you're at home?
Correct.
Okay.
I get paid an 80-hour salary,
Okay.
but I still do pull 24-hour shifts.
Okay, and do you
for
get
our
paid for
Chief of the
those
Day
shifts?
program. I don't get night differential. I don't get hazardous pay. I just get my straight 80-hour salary. But because of the requirements of the job and the standards that need to be maintained, I do pull that 24-hour shift.
Okay.
And to be honest, I work way above 120 hours of pay period. But
Yes.
I only get compensated at 80 hours.
Okay.
And so does everybody here.
So there's no one in the like that has what I'm asking, what I'm trying to describe to you. There's no one in the agency that goes home but still gets paid for the hours that they are at home.
If there are, Senator, please tell me who they are and I'll fix it.
Okay. That's good. I just wanted to know. I just want to make that clear. There's also a concern I have with your fire inspections.
Okay.
Okay, you said that you charge the same amount of fees for different areas. Pardon me. Can you not hear me? Okay. You said that you charge the same amount of fees for different areas. Like, for example, you have a small establishment, you charge the same amount for a fire inspection fee for like a hotel.
Yes.
Have you ever looked at perhaps relating the size of the establishment to increasing a fee?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That is our fees and fines proposal. But there is.
When did you come up with the fees and fines proposal?
When?
Yes. You've been in since
I've
2011,
been working
right?
on it, gosh, over a year,
Okay.
year and a half, maybe 2 years actually.
So what's the biggest challenge?
Public scrutiny and the willingness of elected officials to add an additional tax to Guam. So,
Okay. So I'd like to say-
it didn't come into favorable light in the beginning.
Okay.
But I'm continuing to press forward and trying to do my best to justify it.
Yeah.
These are justifiable, collectible fees.
You're right.
And fines. And the overall intent is compliance, regulatory compliance, as well as overall public safety,
Right.
safety of individuals that should enter into this room specifically should something happen and they can safely make it out. So it's never a popular thing to raise fees and raise fines. And so that's why I've had difficulty trying to implement it.
Well, I think that's a fair recommendation if you really, if the numbers are not so enormously huge, and they're fair and reasonable numbers, I think that's something that we can look at.
Yes.
Because it seems that it is the fair thing to do. If you're going to go and for a 400 square foot fire inspection room and then you go to a 20,000 square foot, and you pay the same cost. That really does. It's not right.
You're absolutely correct.
And then which brings me to my next question. Do you have at this time, any buildings that are right now non-compliant with the most recent fire laws and fire codes?
There was a bit of aches and pains when the new fire code was implemented.
Okay.
And just to make it clear that the Guam Fire Department was not consulted at all on the implementation of that IFC. So the entire code was adopted.
So how did that happen?
After the fact,
Sure.
we came in and helped fix it, led by Senator Uggan. We helped fix it to what it is today. In the end, the fire code is a mitigation code. Basically, it's got regulations everywhere that, depending on the occupancy type, the business type, what the building is made of, you can mitigate any issues that arise. So every building is different, is designed different, but they do have some basic safety and fire code fundamentals that are there, and that can be used to get them to be compliant without sacrificing safety and without violating the fire code. So we do have businesses that kind of struggle with it. I know right now with Senator Rodriguez, we are addressing the latest law, forgive me, I believe it's Bill 90, to allow the new provision to apply to existing structures. Because today, it only applies to new structures. And so, our larger hotels that are seeking higher capacity, that code does not apply, and so they can't get that higher capacity. But we're fixing that with Senator Rodriguez's bill, hopefully, and which will allow for some of these, hotels, their ballrooms, to have a higher capacity. So I'm all for working with our businesses. That's actually one of our tenets here is to promote the economy.
Yes, fire chief, but not at the expense of other safety.
Absolutely. Safety. I was just about to end with safety is paramount, and I won't compromise it.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Chief, and to everyone here from the department. for your service, for your continued commitment to keeping our island and our families safe. I have a couple of questions. I just wanted to start off. You mentioned the 21st fire cycle, and that's slated to begin in August?
That is the whole, well, the list, we are expecting the certified list to come to us by August.
Okay.
And we will move as fast as we can to get that cycle going.
So if the Department of Administration is able to provide you with the list of the 45 individuals to move forward, when would be the start date for the 21st cycle?
Yeah, within a month.
Within a month. Okay. If not already, this was communicated this morning to the police department. We want to just encourage you to consider hiring graduates from GCC's Criminal Justice Academy who already meet the academic requirements for the post. So we want to encourage you to do that. Regarding post-training, at an informational briefing a couple weeks ago, and you were present, it was mentioned that GFD and other peace officers could potentially lose a significant amount of fire service personnel if you can't pass the post-training requirements. So my question to you is, if no changes are made to the post requirements between now and the deadline in December, what is your plan to ensure, what are your contingency plans to handle that potential staff loss and the pipeline of potential qualifying candidates?
So as I understand the law, this is the first year, December, where it actually becomes a part of their employment existence or evaluation process. So should a firefighter not pass the post test, and right now we are somewhere around the 70% passing rate. So should any of that 30% not pass, they'll be immediately placed on a probationary status, try to put them into a focused physical fitness program, complete with nutrition, recommendation, and so forth, to the extent possible, given our authority. I only have authority over them for 120 hours a pay period. What they do in their off time, that's a personal commitment that they have to make. But it's rightfully so, and they should make it, because this occupation is what puts food on their table. I am currently going through that process now when it comes to firefighters not meeting the standard. I have one individual left who is not EMT certified, but he's still working it. He's been allowed by NREMT to retake the test, so that's a great thing. But I've already taken steps to reclass him, give him adverse action, reclass him. He's no longer paid as a firefighter right now. I've dropped him down to 80 hours, and I make him, he does more administrative work. And then, I'm working with DOA to figure it out, because even for them, it's a new thing. And so we have to go through a reclass process. The government of Guam protects their employees very well. We can't just straight out dismiss them. We have to find a way to get them a job elsewhere in the government. If not within, if we can find a position for them.
So with regard to that NREMT certification, when was that something that was placed on you? Was that something that an outside group asked you to comply with, or that was something that GFD decided that they were going to
The Office of EMS out of Department of Public Health and Safety Services sets the standard. They duly adopted the National Registry, EMT, as a standard, which is really the only standard for certification for emergency medical technicians. We used to have a local registry where the Office of EMS did the testing and gave the certifications. They no longer do that. They felt the liability was too much, and so they duly adopted the NREMT and reciprocate that certification as a license to practice here in Guam. So that was driven, as to your question, it was driven out from outside. I saw it coming in 2012, and I leaned forward. And so it appeared that it was coming from within GFD. But what I did was I took proactive steps, started to put on classes, get people used to the word NREMT, and get them certified. I've got guys certified NREMT since 1995. So It's not a new thing. It's been around, but now it is the standard. It is by law.
And now this incoming 21st cycle will all be EMT certified when they
Yes,
come out.
it's part of the cycle, yes.
You mentioned about federal, you were talking about the National Registry, right? And I wanted to ask you, in the budget digest that you submitted, I'm just a little confused. In the general fund section, it outlines FY 2016, FY 2017, and then the FY 2018 governor's request. And that's broken out to general fund, special fund, and federal match. I'm looking at the federal match columns, and they're all zeroed out for FY 2016, 2017, and 2018. So you mentioned Kevin Riley is your federal grants person, and so I just wanted to ask, it's my understanding that you were receiving some kind of federal grant funding for 16 and 17, but this shows zero for everything. So
Yes, we receive federal grants without the requirement of a federal match. So no general fund monies or Gov Guam monies are used to match any federal grant. Some grant programs require 20% matching funds. For everything that we do, because we're public safety or the fire service, we have exemptions, and so we apply it whenever possible.
So where might I be able to find dollar amounts for the federal funds that are coming into the Guam Fire Department?
I can apply that. I can supply that to
Provide
you.
that to us? Okay, that would be helpful. I wanted to ask about 911. So how can improvements and required updates to the 911 system help GFD? You were talking a little bit about something that you were able to work out with the OPA, and so now you'll be moving forward with the new 911 system. So can you just give us an update on that?
Sure. Our current 911 system is absolutely antiquated and outdated. There's no parts that exist for it anymore. So as with the rest of the nation, we're moving towards the next generation 911 system, which is fully automated, takes phase 1, phase 2 compliant, and a lot of these things have definitions that are far too technical. But bottom line is it takes full advantage of technology today. Data, apps, GPS, GIS mapping, and call taking, radio dispatching, computer-aided dispatching, and patient care report transmittals. So this new system will allow us to, of course, service our customer base better, answer those 911 calls more efficiently, and in hopes, as part of the second phase to it, absorb 911 altogether to include police dispatching. And I've spoken with Chief J.I. on this, and he's on board with combining our 911 call takers and police and fire dispatch, as you see across the nation. So this new system, I'm very excited about. It's going to come in and totally revolutionize what we do in the emergency world when it comes to that 911 call.
Well, I think we're all looking forward to seeing that. Are those funds reflected in FY18 budget?
Yes, so we've, in the request for information process 2 years ago, we found that a little over $300,000 a year is the going rate for a complete lease program, hosted system. And that's kind of why it's taken this long to procure this project, because there's a little bit of difference of opinion between GSA and Attorney General which way should we go. Do we go the bid process because it's equipment, or do we go for an RFP process because it's a service? And so through many months of back and forth, finally Attorney General Elizabeth Barrett Anderson and I came to a discussion, and we just came up with the final decision, let's just do it as an RFP, which will give us the equipment and the service to have it sustained.
So when you say equipment and service, are you talking about the actual like computer systems and the
Yes.
software? What about upgrades that need to be made to your vehicles and your entire department in order to maximize the technology improvement?
Sure. So every time we procure vehicles, we attach at minimum a 5-year maintenance program.
I see.
And then we also have our maintenance division. I believe we have 4. We just recently brought one on. 4 mechanics who are very who are certified, amazingly certified in many levels of, I believe it's called a 5-star level certification for mechanics, and they do a great job. So they handle the more smaller general maintenance type of jobs. Anything that's major, that requires a major component to be replaced or repaired, then we outsource to any number of the vendors that are out there.
So I think your Oversight Committee Chair, Senator Nelson, alluded to a couple of weeks ago the fire at the Harmon Industrial Park. And so we definitely want to thank GFD for the quick response and for kind of monitoring it until everything was deemed safe. But I wanted to ask if GFD has the access to proper capabilities and equipment and training to respond to these types of fires safely and efficiently. Do you feel like you have enough or you need more?
Our most critical need right now is staffing. I believe we are adequately equipped with the exception of a high-rise unit and some tanker trucks. But we resource that through our neighboring agencies such as Waterworks. And then we also take advantage of our memorandum of agreement understanding with the federal counterparts who in particular to that fire came out with their ladder truck and assisted in the extinguishment of that fire. So where we might be lacking, we've come up with our contingency plans, but that won't stop us, or that doesn't stop me from seeking our own resources, which we continually do.
Great. Yeah, that was my next question about high-rise hotels and condominiums. So kind of in that same line of questioning, do you feel like, I guess that kind of goes in line with our tourism industry and making sure that visitors to the island and also our local residents are kept safe in condominiums and high-rises? Do you feel like we have adequate cultural and language trainings and staff resources to serve foreign visitors in the event of emergency? It's my understanding that, sometimes we'll come across a tourist and we have a language barrier. It's very difficult for GFD personnel to be able to communicate with them, especially if they have a medical emergency. So I wanted to ask you what you're doing to kind of address that.
Yeah, so we have, our network also includes the MBI translating company that has translators should we need it. We also have posted in many of our units, initial questions in different languages should we need it. But ultimately in the emergency world, it's very, it's easy to kind of figure out the language barrier because we only need very little information to know what we need to do right away, because majority of it is all about signs. We recognize signs and we react. We can get symptoms at a later time, which is basically what the patient tells us. As far as the hotel industry and large gathering places of assembly, the Guam Fire Department is a very active member in the GHRA Safety and Security Committee. I would tell you that our tourism industry is fortunate to have hotel owners, business owners that are safety-minded. For the most part, are willing to comply or have a very good willingness to comply to the code. So, fire prevention is, while it might only have 12 or so inspectors, it's a very huge part of our mission set and very important. And it's about 90% really of what we should be doing as a fire service is to prevent the fire as opposed to actually fighting it. So I believe, I can confidently tell you that we are safe, as demonstrated in all those robo-bomb threats that we've had in the past. Hotels like Westin, Outrigger, Hilton Hotel, all evacuated without one injury or death. And that's due to fire code compliance. And so, they were able to evacuate their entire hotel and nobody got hurt. So it's little demonstrations like that or examples that prove to me or evidence that Guam is actually a safe place.
All right, Chief, thank you so much for your time, and thank you everybody for being here. We're really looking forward to seeing the fees and fines proposal that you outlined in your opening statement, working with you, working with the department and my colleagues to update those antiquated fees and fines. And again, I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for your service to our community, and also to thank you for your commitment to training. I think it's important that our community is just able to depend on you, and also all the people that are involved in the fire service, their families are able to depend that their loved ones will return home after every shift. So, Sijus Masi.
Thank you. And I'll pass on that appreciation to the guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Chief, for the presentation. These private medical transport organizations, are they EMT certified?
Yes, they are.
Have you explored using them, or are you using them for any system?
So they are part of our VOAD, volunteer organizations during for active disasters. So yes, we are networked with them under the Office of EMS, and in times of need, we would use them. Yes.
Okay, that's good. The E911 system, I know the colleague brought it up, and I'm glad to see that you have a target date in June, and we've been working closely on this together. And we've also put a lockbox on that E911 fund, and we've also lifted the cap regards to the surcharge. Have you made any efforts with the PUC or any discussion with PUC regarding the lifting of that cap, the dollar cap?
Yes, so as I stated before, I didn't want to explore that yet until we maximize that dollar.
Okay.
As it stands now, we are not. And so I didn't think it was appropriate that I'd go and ask to lift the cap if we're still not using the maximum potential of that dollar. So until this 911 system is put in place and all the, everything is settled, the dust is settled, and we can relook at that fee. If it's adequate, then we'll just keep it. If not, then we'll cross that bridge. But I believe it was your legislation, Senator, that lifted the 25 lines for the hotels, and that made a sizable impact on the amount of revenue that it's bringing in. And unfortunately, we're just not realizing what we can do with it yet. And that's contingent on this 911 system.
Are you thinking, with the AG and knowing some of these proposals that are in the works, are you saying with the anticipated revenue or the historical trend that comes into the E911 fund is sufficient for what you're planning to do and to carry out?
At this point, yes. Again, we won't know until the final numbers come in based on the contract negotiation. But based on the RFI that was conducted, 300,000 plus roughly in that neighborhood is what the lease would be on an annual basis. And as of today, the 911 fund can afford that 300,000.
The fee structure proposal, are you going to, I know you intend to bring it before this body, but are you going to exhaust the AAA process first before, or?
Well, that's exactly why I wanted to, and I want to present it to my oversight chair, Senator Nelson, and get her recommendation on what's the best way to do it. I just see double effort if we were to go with adjudication process versus legislation. I see that as double effort, and I would much prefer that we just put it all together in one package through legislation, and we can meet all the requirements of a public hearing in this venue.
Recently,
I just see it as a simpler path of least resistance.
GPD maybe a couple of years ago went to the AAA process, and it went very smooth. But I know that Guam Fire has a larger extent as far as fees.
Yes.
But I just wanted to let you know that they went to the AAA process and went fairly smooth, and I highly recommend exploring that process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. Just a couple of questions. How many fees and fines are you looking at reestablishing or readjusting, Chief?
Well, the full fee schedule is a couple of pages. I mean, there's like 1,000 different citations that we can cite in just the fire code alone. But we also are looking into fees and fines, or fees rather, for services that we provide on the fire truck, to also increase our services that we provide in the ambulance. Just to give you an example of what we're losing, as of last year, based on statistics for 2016, just on Medicare and Medicaid potential revenue, we are losing out $2.9 million a year. That is the reason why is because we currently charge $195 for an ambulance run, and the Medicare allowable fee is $249. So we are losing basically $95 a run just on Medicare alone. Now the proposed fee, because Medicare does require a certain percentage over that we have to charge, our proposed fee will be at $600, and that is recommended based on municipalities of our size, the call volume, and the size of our department and the services we provide. So we did put a lot of thought into it. We've had assistance with our third-party biller and what the appropriate fees would be in communities like ours. And so we do have that all ready to go, for presentation. And shortly after this hearing, I hope to present it.
Right. Now, in terms of federal funding, it was brought up. What percentage generally of federal funds play a part in your overall operations? For example, with all the anticipation of potential federal cuts, if, let's say, come tomorrow, any new federal grants or existing federal grants just completely went out the window, if we were to project ahead, what type of deficit would that put you guys in terms of your budget?
So we receive a little over $2 million total in federal grants, which we use primarily for equipment purchases. None of it is used for employee salaries or anything of that nature, specifically equipment. So the impact to us would be equipment purchases. That said, in the entire existence of this department, the government has probably bought maybe 2 fire trucks and 4 ambulances. Every other equipment that we have is all majority are federally funded. And we're talking about the larger purchases. The smaller equipments we do buy with our flame fund, such as rescue repelling sets, helmets, and so forth.
Right. Now, in terms of certifications and qualifications, in terms of your staffing, I know you had mentioned that you're still trying to figure out with DOA what to do, and that's an issue with a lot of with posts coming up and other peace officers, and actually just in the government as a whole, with individuals who are unable to perform their duties. Where are you with that, and what kind of, are these individual talks you've had with DOA, or is this something, at least to your knowledge, that the administration is looking at as a whole to start addressing?
One thing I think administration as a whole has to look at it and address it. Because one thing we have to remember is that we are talking about career employees who are fully vested in the retirement and who have created a career. And these post standards were brought onto them, probably halfway, if not almost towards the tail end of their career, for the majority of individuals that may or may not be passing. So we have to take that into consideration.
My concern are not necessarily those that can't pass it, right? I mean, that becomes more of a question for willpower. But my concern are those that physically cannot do something. When it's in a car accident, is no longer in any way, shape, or form could ever possibly be a fire or police officer or fire fire and rescue ever.
Sure.
Again.
So that is the reclassification process. I do have a few employees that I've had to take that path with in my time as a fire chief, and they've either, we would move them towards reclassing to a new position. I would do my best to try to keep them within GFD, but if not, then we look elsewhere. But for the most part, these individuals ended up going towards a medical disability retirement or just retired.
All right. Now, looking at the vacancies, you have 2 categories here, uniform personnel and civilian personnel. If some of these firefighters lose their certification or are no longer able to perform their duties in that job description as a firefighter, are any of these civilian positions, are you looking at the potential of reclassification within the department for some of your backlog?
Exactly.
And so with some of the positions that you have, looking, I think, 3 right now, unfunded vacancies and 5 vacancies, so you're looking at those 8 positions potentially being funded to open up positions in uniform personnel?
I'm sorry, which positions are you talking about?
So you have five, my apologies, you have five vacancy positions that are funded under the civilian division of your department. And then you have three that are unfunded. So let's say they were to be funded, you'd have a total of 8. And so would you be looking at filling those positions with firefighters that are not able, that are in that category?
Yes, so DOA has already advised that if we have employees that fit that category, that we need to look at them first. They have, employee rights, obviously, and so, and really, as a manager, as a leader, you would want to take care of your career employees and keep them. So yes, I would attempt to fill those positions with employees that might fit in that category.
How many
before
would
I
you
seek
say
outside.
you had in that category, both for medical reasons or just for other reasons regarding the EMT certification that they can't make it?
Yeah, I believe we have 3.
Okay.
Yeah, and these are temporary profiles. I would tell you I have a story of one of our firefighters, Dave Flores, who appeared to be a permanent profile and miraculously came back after 3 years to full duty. So, it's kind of, every individual is different, like I stated in the post-hearing. Every single employee has to be looked at individually and looked at which way that the personal rules and regs can apply to them to their benefit, really, because you want to take care of that employee.
Now, with the regards to EMT certification, is that only, in total, only one so far that has not yet achieved it, or does that also inclusive of the number of those who are not able or eligible anymore to get it because of maybe
So
administrative
100% of my firefighters are EMT certified. This one individual just had an administrative issue that he has to address with NREMT, and he is addressing it. They've allowed him to retest. So as far as that is concerned, it was in February of last year, 2 years ago, where I had 36 non-compliant firefighters is what I labeled it. Those firefighters that are not EMT certified.
are not, or now?
They were not.
They were not.
And
Okay.
through different efforts or different application of the rules and regs, in other words, enforcing it, and being the tough leader, making some tough decisions, we brought that 36 down to 0, really. Every individual employee has their individual issues and concerns, and sometimes it does take some effort to get them compliant, but it's incumbent of us to do it. So,
Right. Thank you, Chief. One couple more questions.
Sure.
And again, regarding EMT. Now, with these new proposed cycles you have coming up, have you had to readjust the application process for a fighter fire? And I'm sure you've already done it, so that to be reflective of both the NREMT standard that they must maintain. So, no felonies, no domestic violence issues, and anything having to relate to drugs would pretty much put them out with
Yes.
NREMT.
Yes.
And so that's all in the application process, and they're vetted prior to even.
okay, so EMT is given to them after they're hired. It's part of the fire cycle. And if they don't achieve it within that probationary status and timeline, which is 6 months, then they will be dismissed.
Is there a screening process for potential candidates who wouldn't, even if they tested or were a firefighter, wouldn't even qualify for EMT? So prior drug convictions, things
Yes,
like
police
that.
clearances, court clearances are required,
Okay.
part of the application process.
All right, and that's screened as part of the selection, because I know it is highly competitive.
Yes.
Okay.
We actually take our internal affairs team actually takes an extra look into like the registry, sexual predator registry, and things like that. So our internal affairs guys do an extra background check on each applicant.
Right, and I think maybe it's more, or yes, my last question, would you consider, with your news cycles, looking at having them sign some kind of disclaimer? Is that something they already do with NREMT? For example, I'm thinking maybe really far ahead, and as part of the adjudication process. You have somebody coming in on this fire cycle. 10 years from now, something happens. they're no longer able to be an EMT ever again, either through some kind of permit or some type of action. And you know NRMT has different standards than what we do in terms of that certification. Now, would said disclaimer be beneficial in terms of the removal of that employee without the adjudication process? Is that something you would consider doing?
Not a disclaimer, but I think that the act in itself will set the wheels in motion of what your concern is. First of all, NRMT requires 2-year certification. So every 2 years, they got to provide a police clearance, court clearance, and get recertified. And then, as a government of Guam employee, there's a requirement that should they have an infraction run in with the law, they are required to inform their supervisor. And once management knows about it, we have our 60 days to act. So if it's an incident or a crime or an infraction that is detrimental to their job, then they will lose a job. In my time as a fire chief, I've done all 3 adverse actions, unfortunately. But those are the kind of the tough decisions we got to make. But the rules and regs exist. It does account for that, and so which probably negates the need for a waiver or disclaimer.
Okay. I think at this time, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
This morning, this afternoon, a lot of questions have been asked about post and the implementation date of December of this year. We did this together several years ago when there's like 2 or 3 years, if I'm not mistaken, that they can still stay on while they try to qualify, right?
Yes.
So I think we should probably clarify that for the community, that
Absolutely.
everybody not capable of filling the requirements this December will not be terminated,
Correct.
will not be reclassified this December, but they have a process.
Yes.
Can you detail that process for?
Sure. So the basic timeline, initial timeline is over 3 years. So the final end date for you to be post-compliant is 2020, December of 2020. But it's the hopes that from this moment, and actually years ago when it first started, that we were getting our employees, our peace officers, our firefighters on that trail to fitness and good nutrition. So no, come this December is just the first by law requirement that we have to do the post test, and the way I interpret it, it becomes a part of their employee evaluation now, where before it didn't. So if somebody who's not post compliant is up for an evaluation, they should not get that standard performance because they are now substandard if they're not post compliant. So that's how I envision that I'm going to apply it, and I imagine the rest of my fellow chiefs will as well. If they are not meeting that post standard by December 31st, 2018, then they are now substandard with, in the realm of employee evaluation. And, it's incumbent on leaders to get them back to the standard. And they got 2 years to do it after that.
One other question. This morning, there was questions about using the federal GSA.
Sure.
You and I got beaten up pretty badly when you were trying to.
Yes.
Why don't you recount that to the new senators so that they understand what Chief Cruz was trying to say this morning about buying local and how ingrained that is?
Yeah. So Speaker, I in my time as a fire chief, procurement has always been the difficult task because every single project is different. But yes, there is law that exists that requires local purchase. When we were first approaching it, I was doing my best to get the fire department under this organization called GPO, Group Purchasing Organization. It's where fire services across the nation group together and they put out a bid. A fire truck in California is just a good fire truck that can work here. And by that, because of that bulk purchase, they get a very low price. The problem with that is, you're stuck to one truck, whoever that nation winner, one brand of truck, and we don't know if the vendor that's here on Guam, that's the certified dealer, would service that truck, if the warranties are covered by them or somewhat to that nature. And so, that became part of the big picture too, the complications to go with it. So local businesses came together and they fought it really hard, that, you're taking money off island. And for us, it's very important because you can't just go to, any of these car lots and buy a fire truck. And so these companies, and you're talking about a $400,000 to $500,000 apparatus with their profit margin probably somewhere, 100,000.
Now about
at
probably
least.
about 55%.
Yes, probably. So, this is big money. These are big purchases, and these business people came together and were successful in their bid to keep the purchases local, primarily local. So, in order to even go to federal GSA, you need to get at least three businesses or company, 3 bidders that say they can't meet the price, or they can't meet the specifications. And so it's even come to the point where your specifications have to be 100% functional based. You can't say, I want this size compartment to fit my Onin generator or my Kawasaki extrication tool. You actually just have to say, I want a compartment that can fit a generator. You just got to be functional in that sense. And so, and we went through this, my first year and a half, protest after protest after protest over this. And so we conceded, really, and just went with the procurement as it is. So yeah, it's a very difficult animal.
It's interesting.
Did I answer your
You
question?
brought that up because wasn't there a similar situation with the dump trucks with solid waste, kind of on that same model with the specifications?
But the court just overruled it and
Yes.
said, never mind. But we don't have that authority. So I just wanted to enlighten the members about the fact that you came in and you brought in the chief and you're trying to do this, and it
Yes.
sounded like a great idea, and those of us that supported it just got beaten to.
Very true. Very true.
You
I did too, by the way.
Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chief, and everyone present. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your testimony. If I may ask you some questions regarding you're expecting 45 of the recruits to come by August, and that you're pretty confident that will occur this time by August? Because I know there was a significant delay that you described earlier, but you're confident that will occur by August?
That is the due date that was given to me. So
If it doesn't seem to match with the number of vacancies that you have, are you authorized additional recruitment after that?
that's exactly what I was requesting for the carryover of the vacancy pool cost account, which is that additional, or what we're projecting a lapse of about 700,000, which is enough to fund another 30 fire recruits.
So just carrying over the vacancy pool, your authority to spend that authorizes new recruitment?
Yes.
Okay, so that would give you 30 more?
Yes.
All right. And do you have any recommendation, I guess, that we could help with if you are going to pursue 30 more that would speed up the administration? I'm expecting if you had that many applicants the last time, there may be even more this time, and I don't know, do you have any recommendation on that?
Yeah, my recommendation, like I said, but let me just caveat with the fear that it might come out of my budget, but DOA needs resources, and that's just from my outside looking in. They do need some staffing maybe, because that's the only way I can see it. Department of Administration is the hiring authority for all of Guam line agencies. And so, if they have a, very minimal staff, they're servicing, over 20 agencies, large agencies including us. So I think that's where it's at. I think the efficiencies are needed there, the resources. As far as us, we just need the funding and the list, and everything else is covered in that 700,000. That includes training, that includes the salary, that also includes their personal protective equipment, their full set of bunker gear within that 700,000.
Okay, it looks like from the 45 additional that you will be hiring in August, it's going to give you 22% or minus 22% relief. That's the figure I got from here. But anyways, a little relief in the overtime.
Yes.
But not a complete relief in the overtime. What do you think, how long do you think it would be before you could get the complete relief in the
As with our firefighter compensation and as with the fire service across the nation, you will never eliminate 100% of the overtime because our compensation schedule is set at 120 hours, which is 106 hours paid straight time, and then 14 hours of overtime. So unless we cut services, shut down a fire station, that's the only way that you'd be able to eliminate overtime altogether with our current staffing pattern, our current staff.
Well, that's what I'm asking. If you increase the staff with the 45, you get a little bit of a relief. If you increase it by the 30, in addition to that, what kind of impact would that have? I understand you probably never get 100%, but would you? Is that where we should stop, or?
Well, we're like you stated, 126 vacancies. If you can
70,
give me
yeah.
all 126.
But the 126 represents uniform and non-uniform, or only?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
So what about uniform only?
Uniform, my last count was 104. I'm sorry, 113 total vacancies for uniform personnel out of that 126.
All right. And are you saying that if we filled 113 vacancies, we would still incur overtime?
Yes.
Because of the formula?
Yes.
All right. Okay, and what about under your current staffing pattern, or even with the 45 that you're expecting in August, does this, I was just concerned because you said something about it requires 4 people, right? Every service
Yes.
call that you make. Does that mean there are 4 people at every station at any given time, or is that a minimum?
No. As it is right now, we are at a critical staffing level. Even with this exorbitant audio councils and overtime, we can only regularly staff our trucks with 3 personnel. Now, how we mitigate that is we sacrifice our timely response. The standard is to roll out with the fire truck, 4 personnel and equipment to 90% of our calls within 8 minutes, 6 to 8 minutes. When we drop down to 3, we extend that time to above 10 minutes because we also respond with an additional truck just to meet that standard. And so where that matters, we kind of say it laughingly sometimes, but seconds do matter in this world. And so when you lose a second, it could mean the difference between life and death. So we're sacrificing time and seconds by having to dispatch additional units and leaving a larger area uncovered when that truck is having to go to the assisting jurisdiction. So we do still need to bring in 4 per truck as much as possible, and there's creative ways that we can mitigate that, but on the average we do need to find a way to maintain that. Because the bottom line, it's a safety standard.
Yes, so yeah, that was, I'm glad you pointed all that out, that matrix, the 8 minutes, 10 minutes, that was good. That's what I want to know. So what would it take to get you to the 4-person at every station at every moment? How many employees?
Well, 113, based on this graph that's in front of you, 113 employees. But being realistic with the demands on funding and the government as a whole, I'm hoping to get at a minimum 30 a year until we reach that number. Now, mind you, there's still a high attrition rate. So right now we're averaging 15 retirees. We're currently at, I believe, 6 for this year, and we're expecting a few more. So we hire 45, we're going to lose 15. And so that gives us that 30. Come the next year, you give me another cycle of 30, the net might just be only 15. So it's going to take some time to get to where we want to be, and being realistic.
Okay.
I know I'm not going to get 113 fire recruits, and I understand that. The police, they need staffing, customs needs staffing. So we want to be part of the team as well, but we also don't want to be left behind when it comes to recruitment.
No, absolutely. I think this is something that the community will be very concerned about, and we need to work together to find a solution to it. But when you talk about this, there's you're working with GURA to do the Sinahanya Fire Station. Is there any plans with GURA to do a headquarters similar to what the police department is doing? Have you guys?
Yes, we are infused with that plan. The Lieutenant Governor, as the overseer of public safety, one of his big visions is a huge public safety headquarters. That is part of the long-term planning. Taking, some of it is considering our rentals.
Yes.
How we rent office space, and taking that money out and using that to build our public safety headquarters. That will include GPD, us, and DOC at a minimum, and possibly customs. So yes, there's discussion. That was the dream since we first started with that property at the Guam Community College in Mingilao, but that fell through. So eventually we'd like to get there. Tumuning Fire Station is in dire need of replacement. I do have a way forward, but there is some complications as far as land ownership on where we want to go. So I'm working with Larry Tovis over at GITA to kind of help us through that process of land ownership with Tumuning Fire Station.
All right. Well, there's no way to incorporate it at this point with the GPD's headquarters in Sinahanya?
Well, that's where the Sinahanya Fire Station is going to be.
Oh.
And yes, we will have a command headquarters there.
I see. Okay.
To the largest extent possible.
All right. And then I wanted to talk to you about, this, it looks like, am I looking at this correctly? I mean, it's a significant part of your budget that is relying on the fees and fines, the new fee and fine schedule. And so I understand why you want to present that as soon as possible, why you want to go the legislative route. My concern is that, I think it's very risky. I don't know, I would caution you. But this is how the budget was submitted to BBMR, with based on increased fees and fines?
For that particular request, yes. And actually, to be honest, I requested a lot more. But it was BBMR that pulled the reins and basically said, let's be a little bit more realistic, and let's not spend the money before we even received it. So, which is, I think is wise thinking. So we can get this going. And like I said, the potential revenue, and this is conservatively speaking, based on our 60% collection rate with our ambulance billing, we can potentially make $9 million. And so, 600,000 is a very small amount comparable to that, or relative to that. So
I totally understand, but I'm going to tell you right now, for us, I think it is, I would recommend you immediately divide the fines and the fees.
Yeah.
Increasing fines is completely different, in at least in my view, than increasing fees, right? Increasing fines are, especially, I'm assuming they're penalties.
Yes.
For noncompliance, things like
Yes.
that. And I have no problem addressing those right away. And if they're fair and based on any kind of standards, then I don't see why, we can at least look at those immediately.
Yeah.
But fees are different. Fees are what we're doing now. We're using the general fund to pay for a lot of these things because this is a service we are providing the community. And
Yes.
so when we start increasing individual constituents' fees, or, the community's fees to use the ambulances, to get services from the fire department, I mean, I feel for them to have to
Yes.
pay for those things. And so I mean, at first look at the budget, it's like, oh, we were able to say status quo and still provide everything that's needed, or now I see not really. But yes, but increasing fees it's going to be a significant challenge. And then you talked about different types of fees, and so I would even suggest you just further divide those things so that you can take care of some of those. Maybe instead of trying to do all the fees that you're talking about, divide them up. Inspection fees, those might be more palatable. You know, maybe the big businesses will disagree, but just depends on what they look like. If they're reasonable, they might be more palatable to get those through faster, right? And same thing with fees that will make us get reimbursed more from Medicare, right? Those types of fees, I don't know. It's just my suggestion because I've seen fees go through the legislature many years, even though I haven't been in here. I've seen this, and yeah, it's a very sensitive thing to raise fees for the people who actually need the services, and especially ambulances, when these are emergencies. This is where the government is in business to take care of, right? And so, yes, and I just think it may be reasonable, but it will still be difficult. So I can see why, yeah, for me, I would just say divide some of those up, send through the very palatable ones, and get those done as soon as possible. And that way, if there's a delay in any of those others, it doesn't hold up all the revenue that you might be relying on here. And what happens if the fees are not approved? So what's the impact of that on this budget?
Well, then that 600,000 would be a ghost figure for us. We wouldn't be able to use it. At least I won't try to use it. Because it is contingent on the fees and fines. Now, the Flame Fund does bring in fees. It does already bring in revenue. So we will maximize to the extent of that available revenue or cash flow. So, but other than that, like I said, like you stated, I'll follow that recommendation, maybe put the more palatable ones up front and see if we can get that going, and then work on the more difficult, challenging ones that are less popular after.
Does the Flame Fund have enough to cover the amount that the 600, I guess, thousand right now?
Yes, it is already coming out of the Flame Fund.
Oh, okay, all right. And the carryover that you're requesting is 760,000. So okay, all right. And that will give you the 30 additional
Yes.
firefighters. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you, Chief, for the opportunity to dialogue, and thank you for your uniform service, separate and aside from your service as Chief. In an earlier budget hearing, I was sharing with the other Chief my concerns and my encouragements relative to the further adoption of technology insofar as emergency communications is concerned. That was one point. This is something I know that Senator Morrison was very bullish on in terms of the adoption of technology. As a matter of fact, and for the record, if those who don't know, it was under your leadership that you were able to foster a more holistic approach, an interagency approach to emergency communications. And so, although Chief J.I. and his agency is assuming the leadership role now that that procurement activity was pulled back, I want to encourage you to continue to be a resounding voice so that we can push that through, because you know better than I do the implications if that two-way communication system should fail. I mean, I don't need to go into that. I went into that at some depth this morning. So that's my first point. The second thing is I also want to encourage you to speak with the other Estevez, the Civil Defense Administrator, maybe even Senator Estevez too, about the need to have an NWP, Neighborhood Watch platform, be more than about policing. It could be about community safety. That means your folks using a shared platform that's hopefully refereed through some agency like the Fusion Center at Homeland, can kind of channel the right level of response. I also want to encourage you to think about this and how it may factor into your budget. The whole discussion relative to the two-way communications and the emergency boat ramp, and especially those blackout areas in the Pocket area, the east side, when you're responding, right? Because I've been in discussions, Chief, and I'm sure the tenured senators would know that the discussion about supplanting versus supplementing comes up from time to time. And when we find ourselves completely dependent on federal funding, then we're really actually vulnerable if that funding should be cut. In this case, if the Trump administration, as an explicit example, through NOAA would cut that funding, where does that leave in the case of the Committee on Land and the Environment? Where does it put that agency and those programs? So in this case, Chief, I know that you had some plans for an emergency boat ramp, and so here's my question, because I was in Alahan discussing a community-based management approach of natural resources, but you know, this is not just for the resource managers. When you provide a boat ramp, that's access for emergency response, and we've had this discussion. So they were asking if there are any plans for an emergency boat ramp in Arahan. Can you comment very briefly about that? And then I have a follow-up question, which is totally unrelated to the boat ramp.
Sure. Well, first of all, there is already a boat ramp down at Inarohan at where Bear Rock is at. However, it is in a dilapidated state, unfortunately, and not really usable for our larger vessels. We can launch skis out of there, but not our boats. But to that end, this project is something that I took personal control of as far as getting a boat ramp on the east side of the island. And working with Jay Rojas at GITA, we were able to get a $300,000 grant to hire consulting services to do the studies, find the best location to put this initial boat ramp amongst 3 locations, which was Inarohan, Talafofo Bay, Surfside, or up at Pago Bay. And so to that end, that's pretty much where it's at. I believe they went out for an RFP to try to identify a consultant. Has not been awarded yet, but that's where that particular project is at this point.
Right, and as you are aware, you know, with the Trump administration pulling back on maybe concepts of climate change, they do very much embrace concepts of disaster preparedness and resiliency.
Yes.
Insofar as whether it's, you know, natural or man-made disasters, right? And so I just want to put that on the record, because everything we're saying today will be factored into the record. I do have an unrelated question, Chief, and I'm a teacher by vocation, so I have no concept of what this means, but it's important for my colleagues here. Could you explain this concept to me of a chief of the day and how it factors into senior management and or 120-hour pay schedule?
Sure.
Thank you.
So we do follow the NFPA guidelines, and in particular NFPA 1710, which is the standard for the organization and deployment of fire services, emergency medical services, and special operations for career departments. To that end, for some of the military minds that are in this room, the fire service has a couple of basic tenets. One of those tenets is span of control and command and control. We stay within the 3 to 7 firefighters for every supervisor. Optimum is 4 to 5. And so that translates all the way up to command and control at the highest level, to include the position of the fire chief. So, you know, I always try to compare between the military and what we do, fire and police. Military, we train hard here in garrison so that we can deploy to a foreign country and fight the mission or execute the mission. Well, the fire service and the police, we're doing the mission here. This is our mission. This is our field of battle. And so that requires, in some instances, such as the trash fire or the fire that we recently had in Harmon, because lives are at stake, decisions are being made that can ultimately affect the life of a firefighter, let alone any victim that we might be responding to. So when certain conflagrations come up, when certain fires become a certain size, it requires higher level of decision making and authority. So as fires build and as they get larger, such as in the case of the Harmon fire, or if we can go back to in the case of 9/11, which could realistically happen here, you will see all the way up to the fire chief on the ground making tactical decisions. So in that end, there's a requirement for a chief officer to be on duty at all times and able to respond at a moment's notice. And so amongst in our organization, if you look on the attachments I gave you, I also put in our organizational chart. The positions that are there are 7 chief officers, assistant fire chiefs, deputy fire chief, and the fire chief. That's by design. And by design, what I mean is each day, 7 days of the week, that chief is the tactical or operations chief of the day. Yes, we all have our administrative roles at this level. We do strategic thinking. We do work with budgets and counseling and employee issues and matters. But ultimately, we're all firefighters. It's the whole reason why the fire chief and the police chief, along with the TAG, are the only 3 positions in the entire government, and this is across the nation, where there's specific requirements for this position. You cannot be a fire chief unless you're a firefighter. You can't be a police chief unless you're a police officer. So those are some of the reasons why that's required, because it is the standard. And so we just practice that here. Even with our vacancies, out of those 7 chief officer positions, I only have 4 filled, which are my 3 assistant fire chiefs and myself. And so we rotate, and you know, just within their 120 hours, they do pull a duty. They pull their duties when they need to, or as the schedule is set up. But there are also other days where those 3 other chief officers should have been that we cover, and we do that on our own. We respond, you know, when there's something huge, we take the call and we go, even when we're off duty. So, you know, and I just have to commend these individuals, because they're doing a lot. Not only are they having to do their administrative duties, which, you know, account for about 70% of their overall scope of work, scope of duties, they still have to respond to fires. As in the case you saw this morning, you recessed because an attention, you know, that, or something, an incident requiring the attention of the police chief happened. And you don't find that in any other career field. You know, no disrespect to my fellow cabinet members, but the DOA directors doesn't have to meet that standard. You know, they don't have to respond at a moment's notice. So, because of the nature of our job, because of the intimate decision making that needs to be made or happen, because literally lives are at stake, that is why chief officers are having to pull these duties. Now, this is not an only on Guam thing. It's not a government of Guam thing. You can go right up to our neighbors at Anderson Fire Station and find every single one of their chief officers, to include the fire chief pulling a 24-hour duty. Same with down at Navy Federal Emergency Services, Federal Fire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Madam Chair. For the record, on my final point, I want to say that on the topic of adjustment to fees or other fines, that I'm in full support of recommendations that would be fair and reasonable. And the reason why I state that explicitly is because I've been in countless discussions in the GMHA, the Guam Memorial Hospital context, and especially where there's a clear and compelling need for the recovery of monies that are spent by the people of Guam. That's a reasonable expectation, and most especially, Chief, when it's for the advancement of activities that are for profit. Okay, so I just want you to know that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I apologize. I overlooked this one thing. This is just from the spreadsheet. It's titled the Administrative and Support Services Bureau program, and under contractual for 2016 it was 194,146. For 2017 it was 321,000, and for 2018 the request is 0. Could you just clarify that?
Yeah, so the difference there is it shifted over to the flame fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Well, Chief, thank you very much. It was a very informative hearing, and I think you have a few people here that are supportive of some of your fees or most of your fees. Just submit it to the committee and we'll divide it up amongst the members so that we can start addressing some of them, okay? I don't think there are any further questions. I want to thank you and your men for all and women for all that they do for the community. And with that, this budget hearing will recess until 10 o'clock on Friday, June 2nd, when we meet with the University of Guam. Thank you.
Thank you.